Hello friends, my name is Nick and today I'm going to give you 15 options for some interesting, unusual houseplants that should cost you less than $15. Of course, price is subjective depending on where you live and the retailer you purchase your houseplants from. So let's say give or take $5 just to be safe. But if you're looking to bring in some really cool houseplants into your home and you don't want to break the bank, I think I got you covered. So let's start off this long list today with some houseplants in a group of plants that I really love to collect. If you follow me here on YouTube, you know that I love collecting Peperomia plants. There's just so much variety within the genus, and there are certainly the staple Peperomia species that you're going to find in practically every houseplant purveyor. But there are definitely some really interesting varieties if you do a little bit more digging. Unfortunately, Peperomia across the board tend to be more inexpensive houseplants. So there are a lot of Peperomias that could be on this list. They could be contenders. But today I'm going to talk about Peperomia verschaffeltii. This looks very similar to the watermelon Peperomia. I think it's got a similar common name like the mini watermelon Peperomia or something along those lines. But it's just a kind of different Peperomia watermelon, Argyria, if you will. Definitely has those similar characteristics, but it kind of also takes on more of those characteristics of like a Peperomia caparata with the more ripply leaves. So I just really appreciate this one. I think it's a more underappreciated Peperomia just because I think that Peperomia caparata and the watermelon Peperomia both get a little bit more attention than this one. But like I said, I think it's the best of both worlds. This is a Peperomia I haven't necessarily mastered the care of, I will say, but I'm always learning from my mistakes. So my number one tip for caring for Peperomias that have a little bit more succulence to them is to leave them be inside the plastic nursery planter that you purchased it in. So could I plant this in here directly? Yes, I could, but every time I have done that, I have had bad news. So I'm gonna leave it inside this plastic nursery planter as long as I can. If it gets a little too overgrown, we will take the steps necessary to repot it. But for right now, I am just going to, like I said, learn from my mistakes that I made before. And so far, it's only been a month or two with this guy, but it's been smooth sailing in comparison to my last attempt. So feeling much better about this. And I have one more Peperomia to share with you, but I believe from here on out, everything I'm going to be talking about is in different genuses or genera. Is the correct way to say plural of genus. But some are in like the same families of plants, so some are pretty closely related. I will talk about them, but you're gonna get a lot more variety than, you know, what you're getting right now. Just trying to put that across. So, so this is a Peperomia Angulada right here. This one I got for like $5, and I think that's an incredible deal. Like I said, Peperomia across the board tend to be pretty inexpensive, but there are some doppelganger Peperomias, like the Peperomia quadrangularis, is an example of a Peperomia that tends to cost a little bit more money in comparison to some of the other ones. I don't know why that one in particular brings a heftier price tag in many situations, but Peperomia Angulada, very closely related. Obviously, it's a Peperomia, but very closely looking visually, it gives me more of a Peperomia quadrangularis meets a Peperomia tetragona, or the parallel Peperomium. So once again, like the best of both worlds, but both of those Peperomias are, I think, much more prevalent. However, I would say this one has really been popping up in prevalency lately. This is one that has been, you know, appearing in all the little like 2.5-inch pots from terrarium growers and all that. I've never really seen this much larger, but one of the things that I also just really enjoy about Peperomia is that they tend to be sold in very small pots, so you can keep a lot more of them in your home. If you enjoy these two Peperomias, verschaffeltii and Angulata, I highly recommend checking out some more because there are over 1,000 species of Peperomia out there. Probably only about 50 to 100 roughly that you will find being produced. Many of them not mass produced. Many of them you'd have to go digging for from like terrarium sellers on Etsy, but you'd be surprised the amount of Peperomias you find in today's climate in comparison to a couple years ago when I first got started collecting. So let's move on to another family of houseplants. This one is really interesting. Let's grab this one because I think this is going to be the most known of the ones I'm going to talk about today. So this is a Tradescantia Zebrina tricolor. Is that what it's called? Multicolor. Tradescantia Zebrina multicolor. It's got too many colors to just be a tricolor on here. So this is an inch plant. This is very closely related to the standard Tradescantia Zebrina that you would see, which is just that purple inch plant, or they call it a wandering dude sometimes. A fantastic trailing house plant. I will say once you've had them for like a couple of years, they tend to get really leggy, but fortunately they're very easy to propagate. So if you just cut this stem right here just like you would cut any stem houseplant in between two nodes and put it in water. These root up incredibly fast and you can just fill out the planter. And what I mean by leggy is that you can see how this one I've only had for a short period of time. It is still very, very full on the top, but over a couple of years it'll start to get some real length to it. And all of the foliage might be like down here, and there might be some like bare vines, as this isn't Tradescantias across the board, and I would say all spiderworts when I grow them indoors in my experience, which I could have very different experience from you guys, but they tend to just lose some of their foliage from inside the planter as they grow out. So that's what I'm saying about how you can cut them back and refill the planter if you're not happy with the way it looks over time. But I got at least a year or two until I have to get there, just giving you some advice of how you might care for this houseplant down the road. But a really interesting trailing houseplant that is, of course, on the more inexpensive side of things. But I really love Tradescantias and spiderworts because they look very like weedy, just like very of the earth, not really like those like very showy tropical houseplants. This one with the pink coloration I think is the like most showy type of inch plant or spiderwort that you're going to find, as there are a bunch of different genus and species of spiderworts that do hold on to this like pink, white, green coloration. Another favorite of mine for many years was the Tradescantia Spaathaceae variegata, which I'm not talking about today because I don't have one in my home anymore because I gave it away when I moved here. But this one is a very close contender and I think a great replacement. And I have a couple more spiderworts that I would like to talk about today. So this is one that I've also been very excited about over the last year or so. So this is my Siderasis Viscada. This is just so neat. It's got these large leaves. You can still see how like very closely related it looks to the last plant I showed you, and many other spiderworts if you're more familiar with some other varieties. But this one has some really excellent characteristics. First and foremost, I really love that kind of silver band that gets down the central vein. Also, it's got this really wonderful fuzz on it, which not only just feels so fantastic to the point that I literally keep this at my desk where I can just reach over and touch it anytime I would like, but it's also this just very beautiful like pinkish magenta hue. I never know how it's going to show on camera, but it's there, and it is just so lovely and vibrant. It's just, if you look at it in the correct light, like I am staring at it right now underneath my softbox lighting, it just is absolutely glowing around the whole edge of the leaf and through the top, depending on what angle you look at it. Really, really fantastic. I highly recommend checking it out. As far as spiderworts go, I feel like this is probably like as expensive as spiderworts get, which this thing costs like $15 to $20 maximum. Definitely can find it for $15 or less, but yeah, a really, really excellent houseplant that I think is another unsung hero of the houseplant world, definitely underappreciated in comparison to many of the other houseplants, but this is one that I don't really understand why it's not as heavily appreciated as the other ones, as this is just like one of the coolest plants ever. Such cool foliage, such a different vibe than any of the other houseplants I grow in my home. Hello, sweet pea! Speaking of fuzzy things, let's segue on to just say hello to Muffin real quick. She just wants to come say hello. Oh, she is so sweet, but she hates being held. But I'm sure she's going to be just hanging out here off camera for the rest of the video until she feels like playing. So I have one more spiderwort to talk about today. So this is a Belosynapsis cilliata. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is a more like out there version of spiderworts in comparison to the other two I was just talking about. So this is like a much thicker one. I feel like this looks very classically like what you would expect in an inch plant or a wandering dude, but this is just super tight and fuzzy as well, hence the species name cilliata, if you could imagine. Also, it has that wonderful kind of like purple shade on the back side of the leaves, which is just one of my really favorite characteristics that houseplants have. And speaking of which, I should let you guys know that the three spiderworts I just talked about, as well as many of the other houseplants I'm talking about in today's video, are available on stevesleaves.com, which if you haven't already, you can use code PhillyFoliage to save 22% on your next purchase from stevesleaves.com. I believe that code is only good for one per customer, but definitely an excellent purveyor of houseplants where you can find a lot of really cool houseplants in that $15 or under category. But this is kind of new to me. I really just love the really tight structure. I think it looks so cool in this just terracotta pot just spilling over. This looks like something you would just find like growing in a conservatory or some collector's greenhouse. I like to think of me like that one day. I'll have a nice greenhouse with all these fun, interesting, unusual houseplants just creeping their way all around, but this one just really has some excellent character. You can see with how tightly it holds itself, and like this, I said, this one's kind of new to me, so I'm excited to see how this one grows over time. Alrighty, so let's move on to another group of houseplants. This is one that I've been very into lately. So this one, I have two of these in my home, and this is the one that has a little bit more character, but I feel like that's being a little bit more true because I've had this one in my home for, I'd say, about a year longer than my other one. So this is a Drymonia chiribogana, and this is what is referred to as a gesneriad. So I think the most popular gesneriad, or not necessarily the most popular, well, yes, I would say the most well-known gesneriad is African violets. And there are a lot of types of gesneriads out there. They're very, very interesting. I think many of them are passed over because many of them are flowering houseplants. And while gesneriads are known for their flowers, many of them also have some pretty neat foliage as well. And I think this one is really proving that point right there. So you can see how large these leaves have gotten. This, when I got this, it was not that big. It was probably just like, you know, around this tall, upright, and had a bunch of these leaves on it, and it wasn't the easiest grower for me at first. I feel like a couple of the leaves got like a little crisped up along the edges. Maybe I wasn't giving it the right humidity, or maybe it was just taking its time acclimating to my home. But after a while, it put up a couple leaves that it held on to, and then it would just start growing new leaves and it wouldn't hold on to them. But I feel like now that it's been a full, I think it's been like 2 years since I've had this, but now that it's been in this space for a full year now and it's really comfortable with its surroundings, it's starting to put up these really wonderful looking leaves you can see here. And even more exciting is that it's actually starting to grow some more plants from the base of the plant here. So that's making me really excited for how this is going to look in a couple months from now, with this plant spilling off over here, over yonder, and then this plant, as well as there's this little piece right here that's growing as well. So I've also had the thought that like I could cut this back and re-root this in water, and then this would just like shoot up a new growth probably in just a couple of days and just grow exponentially, because it's probably sharing the energy with this bit right here. But for right now, I think I'm just gonna let it be, because like I said, I'm kind of really interested to see what this is going to look like over time. But a really, really underappreciated houseplant. This thing is really, really neat. If you have heard of gesneriads, or maybe you're not blown away by like African violets or Asian violets, or lipstick plants is another example of gesneriads, I would highly recommend giving this one a go. And it absolutely falls in the category of $15 or less. I don't think I've ever seen this thing sold for more than that. So definitely don't pass it over, because like I said, I feel like really, really passed over houseplant. I don't think it really gets any attention at all. And this is my Nautilocalyx, what's the thing, glandulifer. This is also really neat. So I am a huge fan of epicias, which are also a type of gesneriad. This is a gesneriad as well, as you could imagine from me segueing into gesneriads. I've never successfully grown an epicia. I've talked about them here after I've had them for like a couple months, and I'm like, I think I'm doing okay. And then like 3 more months goes by and then they just like completely perish. This I've had for a full year at this point, and it's been growing really well for me. I've never grown an epicia that long, so I'm really thrilled. And this is very similar looking to an epicia, except it holds itself a little bit more upright. Epicias are very just like trailing, kind of reacting more like the babies of like a spider plant, if you're familiar. But this is more holding its shape, which I really appreciate. The only thing I will say is, and I would love any tips from any gesneriad growers if you're watching this video, my newer growth, it started coming in, as you can see, normal. When I got the plant, it was like all this dark, like black foliage and purple on the backside. And the first couple of leaves came in like that. But then this growing season, the leaves have been coming in kind of with this interesting color going on. I mean, I don't hate it. I like it a lot, actually, where it's like holding on to that darkness in the inside leaf, and then it kind of bleeds out, and it shows that on the back side of the leaves as well. So I'm assuming it's a light thing, like something to do with the lighting. I just don't know if it's not enough or if it's too much. So like I was saying, if you are a gesneriad grower, or if you've ever grown a Nautilocalyx in your home, I would love to hear what you have to say. But yeah, I just really appreciate this for the way it's got that fuzzy, like alopecia appearance, but it's been handling the standard household humidity of my home excellently, I would say. So really, really have a place in my heart for this houseplant just because it's got so much character. Definitely not one that I would think you would walk into a normal houseplant store and find. You'd probably have to order this online. But like I was saying, I mean, the whole point of this video is that this thing would probably cost you like $10 to $15. Very, very inexpensive houseplant. And it flowers. It flowers these like dark orange, like blood orange flowers. Very, very gorgeous. Hasn't flowered for me since, not since I brought it home. It's flowered a couple times last growing season, but this growing season hasn't flowered for me yet. But I'm also not really sure if there's a time of year that the plant flowers. So I have a couple that are, I think maybe from here on out, these are all in their own groups or families of houseplants. Don't quote me on that, but these are all pretty interesting. So this is my Biophytum Sensitivum. I think this is like one of the coolest things ever. They call this a little tree plant, and I think in the truest of terms, this is a weed. Like in its natural habitat, this is not a foliage houseplant. This is something that grows and takes over its space like a weed would. You can see right here, these are actually flowers and seed pods. And when it opens, it like shoots the seeds everywhere. So I used to keep this inside a glass cloche because it looked like a houseplant that required a lot of humidity. And while I feel like it is, it's been living outside the glass cloche for a couple of weeks now because it doesn't fit inside the glass cloche anymore. So it's doing totally fine. However, I'm a little concerned because when it was inside the glass cloche and these seed pods would open up, they would stay contained to the point that you can actually see inside the nursery planter here, hopefully, that there are some seedlings of the Biophytum Sensitivum. So that's pretty cool, but now I'm a little concerned that I might start having Biophytums poking up in like all of my houseplants. I mean, super neat as well, but you know, it might be like a mother of thousands situation where it's like you bring one home and you think it's such a cool houseplant and you love watching it grow. And then a couple years later, you have them growing in every single one of your succulent pots that was in the nearby vicinity. So just like not trying to go down that road again, but at the same time, this is way more my vibe than a mother of thousands. So I'm here for it. But like I said, it's been living outside the glass cloche. So like I was thinking it looked like a terrarium species, but I think we're fine. Maybe it just needs some acclimating. But of course, it's not growing perfectly, as you can see. It looks good, but it's not growing perfectly. So higher humidity is probably best, but I'm not mad at it. I think it looks fantastic. It also folds up at nighttime. Have you ever seen like a sensitive plant, the Mimosa pudica? If you like rub your finger on it and it like folds up, it kind of does that, but only if it's in darkness. So honestly, I moved this over to my, not that it's, oh, dootsie, not that it's folded up at all, but it's just a tiny, tiny bit down because I moved this over away from underneath my grow light a couple hours prior to filming this video, which I didn't even think about, that it would kind of just cause it to look a little condensed, but I think it's still really, really getting the point across because this thing is so cool. And as you can imagine, because it is a weed, it's very inexpensive. That would be a really cool one to do terrariums with. I really want to get back on my terrarium game. Back when I worked at the plant store, I had like everything at my fingertips to make terrariums, and it was a lot of fun, but I haven't done that in a while. But I'm like, why can't I just do that at home? Why not? So next we're going to talk about this Motta Ternata. I got this one recently from the Steve's Leaves unboxing I did recently, which Philly Foliage, code Philly Foliage, save 22% if you haven't already. So this gives me like mad like English ivy vibes. So cool. And if you haven't heard me rant about it before, I will save you. But English ivy, in my opinion, is a horrible houseplant because it just doesn't thrive in the conditions that we have in our home. In my experience, I know a couple of you are probably going to say otherwise, but I've been looking for houseplants that give you like the English ivy vibe, that don't behave like English ivy, and I think this is absolutely proving to be one of them. This is called plush vine, is the common name for it, and you can see now that I've had it for a couple of months, it's really just starting to like creep up and fill out its base. It's really, really interesting. It doesn't necessarily shoot off tendrils like some other houseplants will, that they'll like grab onto the surroundings if you had like a like bamboo stake. But as you can see, they are also kind of like, they're definitely like spinning around as they look for things. So if I did give this a support to grab onto, it would, but it would twine around it similar to the way a Hoya would, in comparison to like a grape leaf vine or a Cystis Rotundifolia, where it would literally like shoot off like curly tendrils and grab onto it. Does that make any sense? No? Okay. Yes? Great. So really beautiful houseplant, super fuzzy, totally that vibe for me. You know, I'm obsessed with that. Also gives you that kind of like purple coloration on the back. It's just really cool. It looks exactly like a, is it Cystis striata? I'm not sure if that's exactly the scientific name for it, but a sugar vine cissus. It's like this little itty bitty cissus. I tried growing one before, grew well for me, forgot about it for a couple of days and then dried up. So we will try that one again one day, but this looks exactly like it. It is just giving me a little bit more character than that one, so I appreciate it a little bit more, I would admit. But look at it, it's like the cutest thing ever. And I planted it inside this planter that I made back when I did pottery, so I think that's kind of fun. All right, so this one is really neat. This is going to give you probably different vibes from everything that I've talked about in today's video, except for the fact that it has the purple on the back still. Love that about it. So this is a Hemigraphis Repanda. So this is very closely related to the waffle plant, if you're familiar. The plain waffle plant, the really like crispy, like, I don't know, very corrugated leaves, that I've never had good luck with it. I didn't really like purchasing it when I was a buyer because I feel like if they stuck around too long or if we forgot to water them, they would like look very bad. Particularly the tricolor version. There's like a variegated version that gives you more of like the coloration that the Tradescantia multicolor gives. Terrible houseplant. However, I've been trying out a couple more Hemigraphis in my home recently, and I think they're actually really cool houseplants, especially for someone like me who really appreciates those more weedy houseplants. If you can see behind me, I don't think you can, but on the shelf back here, you can see it in plenty of my other videos. My houseplant tour would be the first one that comes to my mind if you really can't see it today. But there is another type of Hemigraphis back there, alternata, which is a really cool, very like large leaf plant with some silver foliage and the purple on the back side. Well, this is giving me more like under the sea vibes. Super, super cool. In fact, I think I'm gonna put this in a terrarium. I think this would really give like good terrarium vibes. Get me back at the terrarium game like I was saying, but yeah, really, really neat plant. I just love how thin it is, but it's been holding up very well. The foliage isn't like, for as thin as the leaves are like width-wise, the foliage still has like some, not necessarily succulence to it, but like some texture to it, and definitely holds on to moisture. Hemigraphis though, across the board, are like plants that need a heavy watering. Like I would say they're on par with ferns, more forgiving, but on par with ferns. If I did not water this for like a week, this thing would be like completely wilted and fallen over, but it would perk back up within a couple of days if I watered it. But there is a threshold there. You let them go for a couple of days too long and they will just be dead. So definitely plants that are not for the traveler, definitely for the helicopter parent, that's for certain. But keep an eye out in your terrarium selection for one of these. And I also believe it's available on stevesleys.com. Let's talk about this. So this is one that I feel like was more expensive many years ago, but over the last like 2 years, I feel like this one has fallen down to the same price as its golden cousin. So this is a Cebu Blue pothos, the Epipremnum pinnatum Cebu Blue. And these are everywhere right now for like $15 or less. I feel very confident in that. I'd say some boutique houseplant stores are probably trying to get a pretty penny for this, still I wouldn't be surprised. But at the houseplant stores that I frequent, I've seen these for $15 or less, maybe give or take like $2, depending. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so this I think has a little bit more character than its golden cousin, the golden pothos. That is giving me way more like tropical vibes, definitely more like aggressive with the way it holds itself up, like more masculine. This is definitely more relaxed, more bohemian vibes, a little bit more feminine. I absolutely love the way it looks with these dark basalt planters. Just really fun silvery blue foliage. It's like the Synapsis meets the golden pothos, Once again, the best of both worlds. And like I was saying, these are available everywhere online. Once again, you can get this on stevesleaves.com. You can get this on Logis.com, which Logis is also where I got my Biophytum Sensitivum earlier. I should have mentioned that. Should be telling you where you can get all of these things. But if you go to your local houseplant store, I can guarantee you they will probably have 8 out of the 15 houseplants I'm talking about today. Some of these are a little bit more out there, but like I said, they definitely will not cost you a pretty penny online if you're looking to make like a fun online plant order. Do a little unboxing for yourself, a little summer unboxing. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. There's just so many wonderful plants that I'm talking about today. But if you have been holding out on getting a Cebu Blue pothos because in the past they were a little bit more elusive and expensive, I think now's the time. I think the only thing about this is that this is probably the most subjective one out of all the houseplants I'm talking about today. This could still be more expensive in your area of the world, but in the United States, this has been becoming pretty readily available for a very, very low price, which makes a lot of sense because it's a pothos and they just grow like weeds once they get established to your home. You can see this one right here already has a couple of fun vines on it, so the Cebu Blues are coming in full force. Also, speaking of like that, like fun, like boho, more feminine vibe, I really, really love asparagus plants. There are a bunch of types of asparagus. Some are going to give you even more boho vibes. I think this is just one that's not talked about as much. And like I said, I'm trying to cover some of the more like unsung heroes of the houseplant world. So this is an Asparagus Retrofractus. This is just a very frilly asparagus fern, as you can see. They call it asparagus fern because it is an asparagus. It's very, very closely related to the asparagus that we eat. If you look at a new shoot coming up on an Asparagus Cetaceous or Asparagus plumosa, the more classic asparagus fern, it literally looks identical, except like 15 times smaller, but identical to an asparagus shoot that we eat. You can see here's a new shoot coming up on this one right here. Not necessarily as identical as the other one, but you can still kind of see where it gets these little thorns along the stem. Hopefully you can see it kind of is giving you that asparagus shoot vibe. And then up here is all of like the stuff on the top of the shoot. It's all very closely related. It's just what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I wouldn't eat this. It doesn't mean it's edible, but it's still very closely related. But I really love how they put off the new growth. You can see this right here is just the stem. It almost looks like a dead stick coming up. Like it looks like a stalk that I forgot about. But this new growth is going to just like slowly like puff out. Just going to, it almost looks like flowers, like it's about to bloom. I've mistaken it for blooming before myself. But it's just a really, really neat plant, totally giving you completely different vibes, similar to the Hemigraphis was giving different vibes as well. The only note I would have for asparagus is they do get thorns on them. Those little things across the stalk that I was pointing out that I say look like the asparagus shoot characteristics have little tiny thorns on them. So I think you can run your finger down the stem without a problem. I think that is how it goes. But I would not run my finger up the stem because that would hurt. But a really, really interesting houseplant if you've tried out some ferns and you still consider yourself a fern killer, which I believe in you, you can totally do it. Try out an asparagus because it's going to give you those frilly fern bohemian vibes without the headache. I think the only headache this plant is going to give you is that over time you're going to have a bunch of little needles inside your planter that you're not going to feel like picking out. You're just going to leave them there if you're like me. So yeah, that's the only thing I would say about this houseplant. Let's see, we have how many more to talk about? I think we have 3 more to talk about today. So let's talk about this guy right here. I think this is some really fun foliage. This is a Ruelia Macwayana. This is giving me like, I don't think this is a Gesneriad. I don't think it's a Gesneriad, but it's giving me Gesneriad vibes. It looks like the way like the Drymonia's foliage looked kind of condensed down into some smaller foliage. If you give these a lot more light, I'm not giving them very much light, I believe. Or maybe I'm giving it too much light. Ruelia experts, help me out here. These will get some really dark foliage, and they will also get some really beautiful purple on the back side of the leaves. But mine is plain green because I think I'm not giving it as much light. Anyway, they perform totally, totally fine in bright light, low light. In my experience, I think it's Another really underappreciated houseplant, one that's probably not even often sold as a houseplant. I feel like I most often find these in the outdoor selection, but it is a great houseplant. There are absolutely some things that you might find hiding in the outdoor selection at your local nurseries that might be worth bringing inside, and it just so turns out that the things that are sold in the outdoor selection in the same size pots as houseplants cost like 3 times less. I don't understand why. Maybe it's because they're less ornamental. I don't know, but don't sleep on them. This also produces some really beautiful flowers. This one hasn't flowered for me in about a month or 2, but it does flower quite often. It'll just put out these little like pink trumpet-like flowers every now and again. Super fun little dainty plant. Also planted it inside a little planter that I created myself. So yeah, I just love it. Would it be nicer if you got some more of that purple characteristics and maybe flowered more? Yes, I'm talking to you, Ruelia Macwayana. I would like you to do that for me, please. But I still really appreciate it for just this plain little bush that it is. I think it's gorgeous. Just sits on my shelf behind me here next to that Hemigraphis I mentioned earlier. And I just love the way that they look next to each other with this fun veiny foliage, silveriness, silvery realness with the also silvery realness of the so sorry, of the Hemigraphis alternata. Let's talk about this one next. I've been really feeling this one lately. This is in a little penis planter. Aloe Frost is the artist. This is a Euphorbia Leukonera. I think this was in also one of our recent Steve Leaves unboxing. I don't think the last one, but I think one prior to that, because I think I've had this one for not quite a year at this point, but enough time that I have become obsessed with it and could wholeheartedly recommend it to you. The only thing I would say about this is it is a euphorbia, and euphorbias do produce a little like latexy sap if I was to break the leaves or if I was to cut this with some pruning shears. That is one, bad for you to ingest, so I would not get it in your face or your eyes particularly. That would be very bad. And I would wash your hands after handling this houseplant, even if you're just repotting it, just to be safe, because you might make a little nick on the houseplant and get the latex on you, and it can just like burn your skin or irritate your skin. But more importantly, your pets. You don't want your pets to chew on these leaves if they're going to get really sick from it. So euphorbias across the board, I would say, are a no-no if you have really nippy pets. Muffin, my cat, fortunately does not really notice plants whatsoever. But that aside, the foliage is just so killer on this houseplant. I think some of you had commented that as this plant matures, it doesn't keep that kind of like little white veination that it gets on the leaves, but I'm still very interested in seeing how this plant goes over time, and I will appreciate the little white veination that it gets for right now. I also just love the little red characteristics. I'm also just really interested with how this is growing. Do you see the little central stem stalk thingy and how it's getting really thick in comparison to, well, I don't think you're really gonna be able to see, but how it was before. It was like thinner than my pinky before, but now it's like as thick as my pointer finger. So I'm just really interested to see how this grows. I've grown a couple euphorbias in the past. One of my favorites was Euphorbia Geroldii, which was the thornless crown of thorns. That got a little unmanageably huge for me, so I think I gave it away to one of the growers I used to work with in hopes that they could grow that out, because I think it's so cool. But this is one that I'm going to be holding on for much longer than that, hopefully, because I just love it so much and I really just want to witness it grow, and I just think it's so freaking cool inside this planter here. I'm so happy with the way it looks. But this is one, I will admit, I feel like when I got this in the unboxing, I was like, oh, like a euphorbia, I don't think I should really be keeping this around because I have Muffin, but obviously Muffin and I are responsible enough that I don't have to worry about it. But after seeing it, I was like, there's no way I'm giving this away. I have to keep it. I have to watch it grow. It is just one of the coolest plants I have ever seen. Totally giving me like the zebra plant vibe, the Aphelandra, but never, ever, ever would I try growing one of those again, because those are such a headache. And I believe this is the last plant we're talking about today. 15 houseplants for less than $15. So this is a Cystis Rotundifolia. I freaking love this houseplant. I think it's so cool. I think this is like Hoya meets a Peperomia. Best of both worlds, but guess what? It's neither a Hoya or a Peperomia. It's a Cystis. And if I mentioned Cystis earlier, I believe, because I was saying how there's plenty of Cystis that look exactly, or not exactly, but very similar to this Mikania Ternata here, the plush vine that we talked about a couple minutes ago. But does this look anything like that to you? No? And you're right to think so, because Cystis are so cool because they just encompass so much variety within a genus that really isn't even like as rich as like Peperomia is per se. But I just love the large round leaves. They're super succulent and they hold on to the leaves really well, which a lot of the more succulent varieties of Cystis don't really hold on their leaves that well, and the leaves aren't even really anything to write home about. But these are just so neat. Gives you that like sea grapevine, so many things that this is going to give you the vibe of, but I just love the waxy round foliage that has its like serrated edges. There's so much to love about this houseplant, and I feel like this is just one houseplant that just hasn't had its time yet. Maybe one day it'll have its time. Maybe this video will help give this plant the attention it deserves. Do I think it will accomplish that? No. But it is just such a neat plant. The round leaves, I have it of course in this little round cashpo because I just think it looks so good together. Oh my goodness, but yeah, if you like Hoya, if you like Peperomia, and you're trying to try out some new houseplants, I highly recommend Cystis, and this might even segue you into trying out some of the other Cystis. As I said, there's many more leafy varieties of Cystis. And wouldn't you know that this Cystis right here is very, very closely related to grapes, like grapevines, like the grapes that we eat at the store. This is a member of the Vitaceae family, which grapes are a member of the Vitaceae family, and their genus is called Vitis. So the more you know. Didn't know that you're growing something so closely related to something you constantly keep in your home. But I think that's a great way to wrap up today's video. 15 houseplants that are interesting and unusual that you should be able to find for $15 or less. Like I said, give or take $5. It all depends on where you live and where you are purchasing your houseplants from. But if you're looking for some really, really cool houseplants that are always going to be on the inexpensive side, I don't see any of these planning on skyrocketing up in price the way that some of these other plants have on the market. I think all of these are going to fit the bill very well. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Don't forget once again that you can use code PhillyFoliage to save 22% on stevesleaves.com if you haven't already. I believe honestly 8 to 10 of these houseplants that I talked to you about today are probably available on their website. So you can bang them all out in one sitting. So thank you again for joining me. If you don't already, you can follow me on Instagram at PhillyFoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.